In the quiet, unassuming corners of our everyday lives, there exists a realm so hidden that few dare to acknowledge its presence, a realm where every shadow whispers secrets and every heartbeat echoes the silent pulse of a life defined by transgression and remorse. Welcome to Inside the Criminal World, a journey into the underbelly of human nature, where the line between innocence and malevolence dissolves into a tapestry of hidden truths and relentless pursuits. Tonight, I invite you to step into a story that begins in the fragile light of normalcy and slowly succumbs to the overwhelming embrace of darkness. I remember the early days vividly, the world as I once knew it was painted in the soft, comforting hues of small-town life. There was an undeniable charm to those simpler times, a sense of belonging woven through every familiar face and every quiet street corner. But even in the midst of that apparent tranquility, I sensed a stirring within me, an unamiable restlessness that defied the predictable rhythm of everyday existence. It was as though the mundane routine was nothing more than a fragile facade, masking a deeper, more tumultuous desire to break free from the chains of conformity. It all began on an evening when the sky wore a muted shade of gray, and the wind carried with it the distant murmur of secrets waiting to be unraveled. In the dim glow of a solitary lamp, I found myself alone with my thoughts that soon grew too loud to ignore. I felt as if I were standing at the edge of a precipice, the ground beneath me shifting with the promise of liberation and the terror of the unknown. That night, a choice was made, a choice that would forever alter the course of my life. With trembling hands, I reached for something cold and unforgiving, an instrument that would transform the familiar into the irreversible. In that single, harrowing moment, the boundaries of my existence shattered. The comforting cadence of my past gave way to a cacophony of conflicting emotions, a mix of dread, exhilaration, and an inexplicable relief. I had taken the first step down a path where every action bore the weight of consequence, where each decision was a delicate dance between survival and damnation. The sound of that fateful act, echoing like a distant thunderclap, signaled not just the end of an old life but the birth of a new, sinister identity. From that point on, I embraced a duality that became my constant companion. By day, I wore the mask of normalcy, a gentle smile, a kind word, a demeanor carefully curated to deflect suspicion. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers saw only the facade of a woman who belonged, who was merely a cog in the machine of small-town routine. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness claimed the sky, I transformed into someone else entirely, a phantom drifting through the night, armed with secrets too heavy to bear and a soul forever tainted by the echoes of my past. Over the years, I learned the art of reinvention, morphing into myriad identities as effortlessly as a chameleon shifts its colors. Each new name was a shield, each unfamiliar face a refuge from the relentless pursuit of truth. Yet, no matter how many layers I donned or how far I ran, the past remained a persistent specter, whispering reminders of blood-stained nights and irrevocable choices. For every moment of fleeting freedom, there loomed the threat of discovery, a constant, nagging reminder that the advances of modern investigation could peel away even the most intricately woven tapestry of lies. It was in the quiet hours of solitude that I began to understand the true cost of my choices. Each day, as I navigated the deceptive calm of routine, I carried the burden of countless lives altered by my hand. The faces of those I had wronged haunted my dreams like relentless phantoms, their silent accusations merging with the relentless ticking of the clock. There were moments when the weight of it all became almost unbearable, a crushing isolation that seeped into every pore of my being, reminding me that no matter how far I ran, I was forever chained to the legacy of my own making. In my ceaseless flight, I encountered passion and betrayal, a dangerous cocktail that fanned the flames of my internal chaos. I experienced fleeting moments of tenderness, brief interludes where the raw humanity buried beneath layers of cruelty broke through, only to be swiftly smothered by the cold reality of my actions. The faces of lovers and lost friends blurred together into a mosaic of memory, a mosaic that was as beautiful as it was tragic. For each act of cruelty, there was a glimpse of compassion. For each carefully concealed sin, there flickered an ember of regret. And it was in these contradictions that I began to see the true nature of my existence. Tonight, as you settle into the darkened space of this narrative, I ask you to peer into the depths of a life that has long danced on the edge of redemption and ruin. Inside the Criminal World is not merely a chronicle of crimes and escapes, it is a raw, unfiltered exploration of the human condition, an unrelenting gaze into the abyss that separates right from wrong. Here, the stories of broken souls and shattered lives intertwine to form a tapestry as intricate and unpredictable as fate itself. It is a world where every whispered secret carries the potential to ignite a revolution within the heart, where every unspoken truth is a thread that, once pulled, unravels a destiny steeped in both sorrow and defiance. I speak to you not as a symbol of pure malevolence, but as a testament to the enduring struggle that defines us all, a struggle to reconcile the light within with the darkness that dwells beneath. My journey is one of endless reinvention, a continuous cycle of rising from the ashes only to confront the inevitable pull of the past. I have learned that no matter how skillfully one hides behind masks and borrowed identities, the essence of who we truly are remains imprinted on our soul, waiting for the day when it can no longer be suppressed. In the following hours, you will witness the unraveling of a destiny that has been forged in the crucible of sin and survival. You will see the city streets drenched in the melancholy of rain-soaked memories, the neon-lit alleys that serve as both sanctuary and prison, and the cold, unforgiving corridors of justice where every step toward freedom is matched by an equal measure of retribution. Each scene, each moment captured in time, is a fragment of a larger mosaic, a mosaic that tells the story of a woman who dared to defy the confines of her own existence and, in doing so, became both the architect and the victim of her fate. The narrative that unfolds here is one of haunting beauty and relentless despair, a journey through landscapes both external and internal, where the boundaries between reality and nightmare blur into an ever-changing panorama of human emotion. It is a story of a life lived on the razor's edge, where every heartbeat is a silent rebellion against the forces that seek to define us, and every whispered secret is a testament to the unyielding power of the human spirit. As you embark on this journey with me, allow yourself to be drawn into the intricate dance of light and shadow, of hope and despair. Listen closely to the echoes of the past, to the soft murmur of memories that linger in the dark, and to the steady pulse of a heart that has known both the ecstasy of liberation and the crushing weight of guilt. This is a narrative not for the faint of heart, a narrative that exposes the raw, unvarnished truth of what it means to be human in a world where the only certainty is the inevitability of consequence. So, with every word spoken and every image that flickers on the screen, remember that you are not merely a spectator in this tale, you are a witness to the unfolding of a destiny that is as complex as it is irrevocable. In the realm of Inside the Criminal World, the shadows are alive with the secrets of 1,000 untold stories, and the light is but a fleeting promise against the relentless tide of darkness. Prepare yourself to confront a reality where the masks we wear hide more than just our faces, where the decisions we make echo through time like the tolling of a distant bell. This is the story of my descent into the abyss, a story of passion, betrayal, and the eternal struggle to redefine oneself in the face of overwhelming odds. It is a story of a life that has been forever altered by a single, irrevocable act, a story that, despite its darkness, holds within it the spark of something unexpected, the possibility of understanding, of redemption, and of the unfathomable resilience of the human soul. Welcome to Inside the Criminal World. Join me as we peel back the layers of secrecy and step into the unforgiving light of truth, a truth that is as brutal as it is beautiful, as relentless as it is transformative. Tonight, we begin not with a promise of absolution, but with an invitation to witness the unfolding of a life defined by choices, haunted by regrets, and, ultimately, driven by the unyielding desire to survive. Let this be the moment when you, too, peer into the depths of the criminal psyche and discover that even in the darkest corners of our existence, there remains a glimmer of light, an ember of hope that dares to defy the night. The veiled identity. I was never meant to be remembered. Yet here I am, haunted by a past that clings like shadows at dusk. My story is not one of heroism or redemption, it is a confession, a chronicle of the slow, deliberate dance with darkness that defined my existence. I speak now in the soft cadence of a truth I can no longer hide, in a voice that trembles between regret and the chill of self-realization. I was born into a life where appearances mattered more than reality. As a child, I learned early that silence could be a refuge, that secrets were the currency of survival. Growing up in a small town where everyone's business was as common as the sunrise, I mastered the art of looking innocent. A smile, a gentle nod, a careful choice of words, these were my weapons. I never imagined that one day these delicate tools would help me navigate a path of betrayal, deceit, and murder. It began with my marriage at an age when most girls still dreamed of endless summers. I married young, far too young for the heavy burdens I would soon carry. My husband, a kind but unassuming man, believed in the sanctity of love and trust. But beneath the tender facade of our union, I harbored a secret, a darkness that whispered of possibilities beyond the mundane. In the stillness of night, when the world slumbered, I would lie awake and wonder, was I destined for more than a quiet life of domesticity? The first night I crossed the line remains etched in my memory. It was a cool spring evening, the kind where the air trembles with the promise of change. I remember the metallic scent that mingled with the soft aroma of blooming flowers. I had been restless, agitated by a tension I could not name. The silence in our modest home was thick, almost oppressive, and I felt the weight of every unspoken thought. That night, I heard the muted thud of a falling object, a sound that seemed to echo my own racing heart. I approached our bedroom with a hesitation that was quickly replaced by an unsettling resolve. There, in the half-light of a flickering lamp, I saw him, my husband, asleep in a disheveled heap. It wasn't a scene of violence, but of tragic inevitability. In that moment, the boundaries between fate and free will blurred. I reached out and cradled the cold, lifeless hand. A part of me, the one that still clung to the remnants of a normal life, whispered that this was an accident, a cruel twist of fate. Yet another part, darker, more insistent, celebrated the possibility of liberation. The days that followed were a haze of routine and calculated normality. I attended church, I greeted neighbors with a practiced smile, and I played the role of the dutiful wife with a precision that belied my inner turmoil. But each smile masked a secret horror. I found solace in silence, letting the weight of what I had done settle like dust on the shelves of my mind. No one suspected that behind my gentle eyes, a storm of conflicting emotions raged relentlessly. It wasn't long before a new figure entered my life, a man whose presence offered both excitement and the promise of escape. I met him on a brisk autumn day. The leaves, ablaze with fiery hues, were falling around us as if nature itself was shedding tears for what was to come. His name was Walter, and in his eyes I saw a mirror of my own hidden desires. We spoke little at first, our conversation was measured, each word a careful step on a razor's edge. I sensed in him the same loneliness, the same hunger for something beyond the ordinary. Our brief encounters grew into a tangled web of clandestine meetings. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world was draped in darkness, we would slip away to forgotten corners of the city, a deserted park bench, an empty street where the hum of traffic provided a soothing backdrop. Walter was like a secret, a shared conspiracy between two souls who refused to be tethered by convention. Yet with every stolen moment, the stakes grew higher, the danger more palpable. I began to understand that I was no longer living in the realm of the ordinary. I had stepped into a world where each heartbeat might be my last. It was during one of these furtive rendezvous that fate dealt another hand. Walter introduced me to a life that I had only dared to imagine in the quiet recesses of my mind, a life where rules were meant to be broken, where the lines between right and wrong blurred into insignificance. With him, I discovered that the allure of transgression was intoxicating. Every touch, every whispered secret in the darkness, was a rebellion against a past that had chained me to a life of quiet despair. But as the nights grew colder and the danger more imminent, I realized that love, in our clandestine affair, was a double-edged sword. It offered me freedom, yet it also threatened to expose me to a world I was desperately trying to hide from. I began to see that every stolen glance, every whispered promise, was like a crack in the delicate facade I had so meticulously constructed. The very qualities that had allowed me to remain unseen now risked unmasking the murderer I had become. I often wondered if fate had orchestrated these events with a cruel precision. Was I simply a victim of my own nature, doomed to repeat the cycle of betrayal and isolation? Or was there a darker force at work, guiding my every move, compelling me to sink deeper into a life of sin and subterfuge? Each morning, as I looked in the mirror, I saw the ghost of a woman I no longer recognized, a stranger whose eyes carried the weight of too many secrets. My inner world was a labyrinth of conflicting emotions. Guilt and liberation, remorse and defiance, warred within me in a silent, perpetual battle. I found solace only in the cold logic of survival. Emotions, as I had learned, were both a blessing and a curse. They could lead you to madness if you let them take control. And so, I resolved to silence the voice of conscience that occasionally whispered reminders of my misdeeds. I locked it away, deep within the recesses of my mind, where it could neither hurt me nor reveal the truth. In the days following my husband's death, a peculiar calm settled over me. I moved with the precision of someone who had rehearsed every step of a grim dance. Each gesture was calculated, every word measured, so as not to betray the tempest that churned beneath the surface. I immersed myself in the minutiae of everyday life, shopping for groceries, tending to household chores, even laughing at the trivialities of small-town gossip. To the outside world, I was the very picture of normalcy. Yet beneath that carefully cultivated veneer, the echoes of that fateful night reverberated ceaselessly. I could still hear the sound of the gunshot, a brief, jarring moment that shattered the fragile peace of my life. I could still feel the chill of death seeping into my bones as I cradled his lifeless hand. It was a reminder that once you cross a line, there is no returning to the innocence you once knew. As the months turned into years, I mastered the art of invisibility. I reinvented myself time and again, donning new identities like a chameleon changes its colors. I married and remarried, each union a calculated move in the endless game of evasion. The faces of my husbands blurred into a haze of forgotten names and silent farewells. Their deaths, whether by chance or design, became mere stepping stones on my path to ultimate freedom. I learned that every life I touched could serve as a mask, concealing the monstrous truth of who I really was. There were moments, however, when the darkness threatened to overwhelm me. In the dead of night, when the world was hushed by the weight of its own secrets, I would lie awake and feel the weight of my choices. I would hear the distant echo of sirens, the murmurs of inquisitive neighbors, and the ghostly whispers of a past that refused to be forgotten. In those moments, I questioned the very fabric of my existence. Was I cursed to be an eternal fugitive, forever running from the specter of my own guilt? Or was there a twisted kind of beauty in the art of deception, a poetry in the way my life unfolded like a well-rehearsed tragedy? I have always been fascinated by the concept of duality. By day, I was a devoted wife, a reliable friend, a pillar of the community. But by night, I was a ghost, a phantom who slipped through the cracks of society. I reveled in the contrast, the delicate balance between light and shadow. In those fleeting hours between dusk and dawn, when the world seemed to hold its breath, I found a strange kind of freedom. I could be both the nurturer and the destroyer, the victim and the perpetrator, a living embodiment of contradictions. Yet even as I embraced this duality, I knew that the life I led was unsustainable. Every secret eventually finds its way to the light. Every carefully hidden truth is eventually exposed by the relentless march of time and technology. I had come to understand that the advances in forensic science, particularly the art of DNA analysis and fingerprinting, were formidable adversaries to a life built on deception. The very tools that once offered a lifeline in the murkiness of my past were now poised to unravel the intricate web I had spun over decades. One crisp winter evening, as I walked along a snow-dusted street, I felt an overwhelming chill that was not solely due to the biting cold. It was as though the wind itself carried whispers, snatches of memories that threatened to dissolve the fragile boundaries I had built around my soul. I recalled the nights spent in barren motel rooms in foreign lands, the thrill of a near miss with the law, and the bittersweet taste of victory that came with each escape. In that moment, I understood that I was both hunter and prey, ensnared in a cycle that offered no respite. I decided then that I must tread more carefully. Every step I took had to be measured, every encounter weighed against the potential cost of discovery. I began to withdraw from the very relationships that had once sustained me. Friends, lovers, even acquaintances all became liabilities in a life built on layered disguises. I sank deeper into solitude, seeking refuge in the anonymity of crowded streets and the faceless corridors of unfamiliar cities. The more I isolated myself, the more I felt like a ghost haunting my own existence. In this solitary exile, I found both solace and torment. The nights were long and unforgiving, filled with dreams that blurred the lines between past and present. I would awaken in cold sweats, heart pounding, as if the specters of those I had wronged were gathered around my bed, their silent accusations echoing in the darkness. Yet with each sunrise, I would steel myself once more, donning the mask of normalcy and stepping into a world that remained oblivious to the sins that lurked behind my gentle smile. My reflections were interrupted by the steady ticking of a clock, an indifferent metronome that counted down the seconds of my free existence. I knew that every moment of calm was temporary, that the delicate balance I had maintained could shatter in an instant. I had already lost so much, sacrificed so many pieces of my identity along the way. Now, as I stood at the precipice of a new chapter in my life, I couldn't help but wonder if redemption was ever within reach for someone like me. But redemption is a luxury reserved for the innocent. I was no longer that naive girl who once believed in fairy tales and happy endings. I had chosen a path paved with lies and blood, a path that led inexorably to darkness. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind burdened by the ghosts of my past, I resolved to keep moving forward, even if each step took me further away from the person I once was. I now live in a city that never sleeps, a sprawling urban maze where the past is quickly forgotten amidst the neon glare and constant hum of modern life. Here, I am known simply as a quiet neighbor, a woman of few words and few friends. I navigate the crowded sidewalks and busy intersections with the practiced detachment of someone who has seen too much to care about trivialities. Yet every so often, in a moment of unexpected stillness, the weight of my hidden identity presses upon me, and I am reminded of the life I abandoned, a life where every smile was a lie, every embrace a calculated deception. This is my confession, the first chapter of a story that has been written in shadows and silence. I do not seek forgiveness, nor do I expect understanding. I only wish to record the journey of a soul forever divided between the light and the dark. My actions, my choices, they are etched into the fabric of time, waiting for the moment when they will be revealed to a world that has long since forgotten the true meaning of trust and loyalty. And so, I continue my solitary journey through a life defined by the duality of my nature. I walk in a realm where every step is a careful negotiation between survival and self-destruction, where each day brings the risk of exposure and the hope of remaining unseen. As the night deepens and the city falls into a restless slumber, I remind myself that I am both the architect and the victim of my own fate, a woman forever caught between the promise of freedom and the inevitable embrace of darkness. I have told you my truth, the first chapter in a life lived in the margins of society, where the innocent facade is but a thin veil over a heart steeped in sin. The road ahead is long and uncertain, littered with the echoes of my past transgressions. Yet in that uncertainty lies the only truth I have ever known, that the secret I carry, the blood that stains my hands, will one day be laid bare for all to see. Until then, I must continue to exist in the twilight, a living, breathing paradox, haunted by what I have done and compelled to seek solace in the only way I know how, by remaining forever unseen. Beneath the mask. They say that a fugitive eventually forgets who they once were. At first, I dismissed it as mere poetic exaggeration. But now, after decades spent under countless names, faces, and identities, I've learned that forgetting oneself is the only way to survive. I was no longer the woman on trial with vacant eyes. I had shed the persona of Sharon Kin, the quiet neighbor with a gentle smile, and become someone entirely different. I transformed bit by bit, like a wild animal molting its skin under the dark canopy of night. Yet, no matter how many disguises I adopted, the shadow of my past clung to me like a relentless specter. Every night's sleep was a sentence, every dream a reminder of the blood and secrets I could never truly erase. I still remember the fateful night with haunting clarity, the night I ended James Kin's life. The autumn wind had howled outside, carrying with it a bitter promise of change, while inside our modest home, a suffocating silence reigned. James had been asleep, unsuspecting in his slumber, as if the world had yet to reveal its cruelty. I stood over him, the weight of my actions pressing down like a crushing guilt. My hand trembled on the cold metal of the gun, caught between a fleeting hesitation and the dark thrill of liberation. And then, with a single, decisive pull, everything changed. James collapsed without a sound, a sudden stillness that shattered the quiet of that night. The echo of the shot lingered in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of blood and the faint aroma of blooming night jasmine wafting through the open window. I stared at his lifeless form, the ghost of a life I once knew, and felt an unsettling calm wash over me. It was not relief, nor was it remorse, it was an eerie sense of freedom, a release from the chains of a predetermined fate. In the days that followed, I slipped into a life of calculated normalcy. I walked the streets of Missouri with the practiced detachment of someone who belonged to the shadows. My smile, my gentle nods, and my well-rehearsed conversations were all part of an elaborate performance. Yet beneath the surface, every glance and every whispered conversation was charged with the weight of unspeakable deeds. I became a master of invisibility, a ghost drifting through a world that had no inkling of the monstrous truth hidden behind my eyes. Then came Walter Jones, a man whose presence stirred a dangerous mixture of desire and fury within me. He exuded strength and confidence, his eyes sharp enough to cut through the fog of my carefully constructed deceptions. But when Walter rejected the idea of leaving his wife for me, something primordial ignited inside me. It wasn't merely jealousy or hurt, it was an all-consuming need to possess, to control, to make him mine by any means necessary. I recall the day Patricia, Walter's wife, vanished as if swallowed by the twilight. The afternoon was draped in a dull gray, as if the skies themselves mourned the impending tragedy. Patricia had come to me, unsuspecting, believing that two women could share their sorrows and hopes. I invited her into my car, promising a quiet conversation away from prying eyes. In the solitude of a deserted stretch outside town, her trust became her undoing. Before she could utter a word, I drew my gun. In that moment, her wide, shocked eyes were the only testament to the betrayal, a silent scream caught in the amber of disbelief. The sound of the shot shattered the oppressive silence, and her body crumpled to the ground, a burst of red staining the pale fabric of her dress. I stood over her lifeless form, feeling the surreal calm of a soul resigned to its fate, as the cool breeze whispered secrets of impending doom. For a brief, fleeting instant, I believed I had outsmarted fate. I meticulously erased any trace of evidence. I wiped clean my fingerprints and disposed of the weapon in a murky ditch far from prying eyes. Yet, as if in cruel irony, fate was never so easily evaded. Walter, betraying the very trust we'd shared, revealed everything to the authorities. His confession was the final nail in the coffin of my carefully constructed existence, a betrayal that left me exposed and vulnerable. I stood before the justice system, a picture of innocence in a world too eager to overlook a woman's capacity for brutality. Somehow, despite the overwhelming evidence, the jury's sympathy for a seemingly fragile woman granted me a reprieve, a temporary freedom that only deepened the bitter irony of my situation. But freedom, I learned all too well, is fleeting. As the noose of suspicion tightened, I made one final, desperate choice: to vanish once again. I fled to Mexico under a new identity, morphing into someone else entirely. There, amid the neon lights and the ceaseless hum of a foreign city, I became a shadow, a whisper in the corridors of time. Yet, even as I built a new life, the ghosts of my past loomed larger than ever. Francisco Ordonez, a man I encountered in a moment of reckless passion, met his untimely end in a hotel room at 3 a.m., leaving behind a trail of secrets that threatened to unravel my existence once more. For a while, I found solace in the isolation of confinement, a prison cell that offered a temporary respite from the relentless pursuit of my past. But the chains of my own making proved too strong, and after 5 long years behind bars, I executed the unthinkable. I escaped, slipping away like smoke into the endless night. Now, I wander a city that never sleeps, a sprawling labyrinth of concrete and neon where each passing moment is a calculated risk. I am known only as a quiet, unremarkable neighbor, a ghost among the living, while the memories of my sins continue to echo in the depths of my mind. Each step I take is measured, each encounter a potential spark to ignite the flames of my hidden truth. This is the confession of a life lived beneath a mask, where the pursuit of freedom comes at the cost of an ever-deepening descent into darkness. I have learned that every secret, no matter how deeply buried, will one day claw its way into the light. Until that day arrives, I remain caught between the promise of escape and the inexorable pull of my past. Shadows in the mirror. I thought I had mastered the art of disappearing. In the labyrinthine streets of Mexico City, I reinvented myself countless times, each new identity a fragile veil meant to conceal the monstrous truth that festered beneath my skin. Yet, as night fell and the urban chaos settled into an eerie silence, I began to see reflections of my former self in every shadow and every darkened window. The mirror, once a silent witness to my metamorphoses, now revealed not just my visage, but the fragmented shards of guilt, desire, and regret that I could no longer bury. Every night, As I wandered through narrow alleyways lit by flickering neon signs and the indifferent glow of street lamps, I was haunted by memories of blood and betrayal. The city, with its cacophony of distant car horns and murmuring crowds, seemed to echo the pulse of my own fractured heartbeat. I would pause outside shuttered cafes and run-down bars, the cool night air carrying whispers of my past like a lament. In those moments, I was both hunter and hunted, a perpetual prisoner of my own memories. It was on one such night, when the rain began to fall in a relentless, silvery drizzle, that I found myself standing before an ancient building, its facade crumbling under the weight of time. I entered with no particular destination in mind, driven by an inexplicable compulsion to confront the vestiges of my history. The interior was dimly lit, the musty odor of decay mingling with the faint trace of old incense. Every step echoed through the empty halls, and in that solitude, I felt the full, crushing weight of my transgressions. In a small, forgotten room at the end of a long corridor, I discovered a cracked mirror propped against a battered wall. Its surface was stained with the patina of years past, yet as I gazed into it, the reflection was startlingly vivid. I saw a woman whose eyes held the secrets of too many lifetimes, a woman whose soul had been marred by every calculated betrayal and every merciless act of violence. For a long, agonizing minute, I stood transfixed, as if the mirror were unspooling the threads of my soul before me. The vision was not one of clarity or redemption, but a relentless confrontation with the self I had long tried to silence. Faces of those I had betrayed, James, Patricia, even the countless nameless souls whose lives I had extinguished, flashed before my eyes, their silent accusations merging with the drumming rain outside. In that moment, the line between reality and memory blurred, and I felt as though I were suspended in a timeless void, caught in an endless interrogation by my own conscience. Back in the present, the relentless rhythm of the rain and the distant hum of the city merged into a single, oppressive melody. I left the building with a heavy heart, the image of that fractured reflection etched indelibly into my mind. Each step I took seemed to echo with the weight of every misdeed, a reminder that no amount of flight could truly expunge the past. In the days that followed, I found myself increasingly drawn into a vortex of paranoia and introspection. The forensic advances that had once been my nemesis now became a spectral presence in my every waking moment. Every whispered conversation on shadowed streets, every furtive glance in crowded marketplaces, seemed laden with the possibility of discovery. The relentless march of technology and memory rendered my carefully constructed web of lies all the more tenuous. I began to sense that the very air was conspiring against me, carrying invisible traces of the past, fingerprints, DNA, and secrets that could shatter the fragile life I had built. Haunted by these thoughts, I turned inward, searching for solace in the only companion I had left, the silence of my own mind. Yet, even there, the echoes of my deeds resounded with a maddening clarity. I spent long, sleepless nights pacing the confines of my sparse apartment, each creak of the floorboards and rustle of the wind outside a harbinger of impending doom. The darkness was not merely the absence of light, it was a living, breathing entity that wrapped itself around me, whispering of inescapable retribution. One particularly oppressive night, as I sat by a rain-streaked window and watched the city succumb to a melancholic gloom, I realized that I was no longer certain of who I was. The myriad identities I had assumed over the years blurred together into a single, indistinct silhouette. I was both the predator and the prey in a relentless game orchestrated by fate, a game in which every move was shadowed by the possibility of my own undoing. The idea of redemption, once a distant and unattainable fantasy, now seemed as elusive as the shifting patterns of rain on glass. Yet, amid the overwhelming despair, a curious resolve began to crystallize within me. I could no longer continue as a ghost, perpetually evading the inevitable reckoning. The relentless pursuit of survival had worn down the barriers between who I was and who I wished to be. In that moment of raw vulnerability, I acknowledged that the only way to break free from the vicious cycle was to confront the demons that haunted me, both literal and metaphorical. I decided, then, to embark on a journey inward. Not a journey of penance, for I was not one to beg for forgiveness, but a quest to understand the labyrinth of my own soul. I sought out old acquaintances, figures from a past that had long since faded into myth, and retraced the steps of my former life. Each encounter was a painful reminder of the person I had been, and yet each one also offered a glimmer of the person I might become if I dared to accept the darkness within. In one such meeting, I crossed paths with an elderly man who had once been a silent observer of my misdeeds, a man whose eyes, though clouded with age, seemed to pierce the very fabric of my disguise. He spoke little, his words measured and laden with a quiet sorrow. In his brief, unadorned utterance, I sensed a deep understanding of the human capacity for both cruelty and redemption. Though I did not share his path, his silent acknowledgement of my existence stirred a long-forgotten ember of empathy within me. As I wandered further into the depths of my own conscience, I began to see that my life was not solely defined by the heinous acts I had committed. There were moments of genuine tenderness and fleeting beauty, the soft laughter of a child in a crowded market, the warmth of a sunlit afternoon that promised new beginnings, that had somehow managed to pierce the armor of my soul. These fragile moments, however rare, reminded me that beneath the layers of sin and self-destruction lay the potential for something more profound. Perhaps I could, in time, learn to reconcile the fractured parts of my being. Yet the path to reconciliation was not without its perils. With every step toward self-awareness, I risked unraveling the very fabric of the carefully constructed life that had kept me hidden for so long. I knew that the pursuit of truth would inevitably expose me not only to the judgment of a society that had long condemned me, but also to the inner demons that had driven me to commit unspeakable acts. The duality of my existence, caught between the desire for absolution and the instinct for survival, was a constant, tormenting reminder that the journey inward was as treacherous as any flight from justice. In the days that bled into nights, I became increasingly fixated on the idea that the past, like an unyielding specter, could never be fully outrun. Every whispered secret, every concealed fragment of evidence, was a testament to the inexorable pull of memory. I was caught in a paradox. The more I sought to escape the shadows of my former self, the deeper they seemed to entwine around my every thought and every heartbeat. And so, with the relentless pulse of the city as my only companion, I resolved to embrace the inevitable truth. I was forever bound to the life I had led, a life where every moment of freedom was counterbalanced by the omnipresent threat of discovery. The mirror had shown me what I had long tried to deny, that within the darkness lay not only my sins but also the faint, flickering light of remorse and, perhaps, the distant possibility of change. I walked away from that night with a renewed determination, a resolve to confront the inner tumult that had long defined me. In the quiet solitude of my mind, I began to chart a course toward an uncertain future, one where the ghosts of the past might finally be laid to rest. The road ahead was shrouded in mist and ambiguity, yet it was the only path that promised a semblance of redemption, a chance, however slim, to reconcile the fractured fragments of a soul steeped in both horror and longing. As I continued my solitary journey, every step felt like a silent vow to confront the specters of yesterday. I no longer sought merely to escape, I sought to understand, to dissect the tangled web of fate, choices, and inevitability that had defined my existence. In that relentless pursuit of self-awareness, I hoped to find the key that would unlock the door to a future unburdened by the relentless weight of the past. Thus, I carried on through the night, every shadow a reminder of my sins and every glimmer of light a beacon of the possibility that, even in a life marred by darkness, there might yet be a way to forge a new destiny, a destiny where the mirror would no longer reflect only a haunted specter, but a woman capable of embracing the full spectrum of her humanity. Descent into the abyss. I began to wonder if the life I had so meticulously crafted was nothing more than a fragile illusion, a mere trick of the light in a never-ending twilight. As the days bled into nights and nights into an endless cycle of restless vigilance, I found myself teetering on the brink of an inner chasm. Every step I took, every whispered thought in the dark, felt as if it were dragging me deeper into an abyss from which there was no return. It was a humid evening in Mexico City when the oppressive weight of my past finally broke through the carefully constructed veneer of my present existence. I had taken refuge in a rundown boarding house on the outskirts of the city, a place where the peeling paint and flickering neon signs outside spoke of lives shattered by forgotten dreams. In the cramped, dimly lit room that I called home, every creak of the floor and every murmur of the wind carried echoes of memories I'd long tried to silence. That night, I sat by a narrow window, staring out at the labyrinth of streets below. The city pulsed with a relentless energy, yet I felt utterly isolated, as if the world had grown too vast and indifferent to notice the agony of a single soul. I could almost hear the heartbeat of the metropolis, a low, rhythmic throb that seemed to mirror the pulse of my own troubled mind. But beneath that steady cadence lay a cacophony of unspoken regrets, the voices of those I had wronged rising in a ghostly chorus that demanded to be heard. I closed my eyes and allowed the memories to wash over me in a torrential surge. The image of James Kinn's lifeless body, the haunting silence that followed the fatal shot, the terrified glimmer in Patricia's eyes as life drained from her, all of these moments collided in my mind, blurring the lines between past and present. It was as though time itself had become fractured, each memory a jagged shard of glass that cut through the fabric of my consciousness. In that moment of anguished recollection, I felt the cold touch of despair slither across my skin. I was no longer just a fugitive, an elusive specter flitting between identities. I had become a prisoner of my own making, trapped in a labyrinth of guilt and regret. Every decision, every calculated move, had led me to this precipice where the only certainty was the darkness that loomed ahead. I could no longer escape the truth. The person I had become was inseparable from the sins I had committed. The relentless pursuit of self-preservation, the artful dance with danger, had transformed me into someone almost unrecognizable even to myself. I began to question whether the chains of my past were not external forces but manifestations of my own inner torment. Each life I had taken, each betrayal that had stained my soul, was a weight that pulled me further into a void where hope was as elusive as the faint glow of a distant star. In the suffocating silence of that night, the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred. I could hear my own voice, distorted and hollow, echoing back at me as if I were listening to the confession of a stranger. The walls of my room seemed to close in, and the stale air grew heavy with the scent of despair. I felt as if I were drowning in a sea of memories, the relentless tide threatening to sweep me away into oblivion. Determined to break free from the relentless torment of my past, I resolved to confront the demons that had haunted me for decades. I began retracing the steps of my former life, visiting the places that had once been the stage for my transgressions. I wandered through abandoned neighborhoods, where every crumbling building and shattered window was a silent monument to lost innocence. In the labyrinthine alleyways, I encountered fleeting reminders of the lives I had destroyed, an old photograph discarded on a curb, a tattered letter clinging to a rusted lamp post, each relic a testament to the irreversible passage of time. One afternoon, under a sky that wore the pallor of impending rain, I found myself drawn to a derelict chapel on the edge of the city. The building, long forgotten by the world, stood as a crumbling relic of faith and redemption. Its stained glass windows, though shattered, still hinted at a beauty that time could not entirely erase. I stepped inside, the cool air of the sanctuary mingling with the faint scent of incense and decay. Here, in this hushed place, I felt the presence of a force far greater than my own despair, a quiet, immutable truth that whispered of absolution and damnation in equal measure. I sank onto one of the cold stone benches, my mind awash with memories of the past. In that stillness, I began to question whether the darkness within me was an unchangeable part of who I was, or merely a temporary phase in an existence that still held the possibility of transformation. The ancient walls of the chapel, scarred by centuries of sorrow and hope, seemed to listen as I recounted my story in a silent monologue. I spoke aloud the names of those I had wronged: James, Patricia, and countless others whose lives had been extinguished by my hand. Each name was a dagger thrust into the heart of my being, a reminder that redemption was a concept as distant as the stars above. As the hours slipped by, the boundaries between confession and prayer blurred. I found myself whispering not for forgiveness, something I knew I did not deserve, but for understanding. I longed to grasp the full measure of the darkness that had consumed me, to peer into the depths of my own soul and confront the truths that lay hidden there. In that lonely sanctuary, I realized that my life was a tapestry woven from both light and shadow, a tapestry that, despite its tattered edges, might yet be reknitted into something resembling hope. Yet, even as I sought solace in that sacred space, the relentless march of time continued unabated. I knew that every moment spent in introspection carried with it the risk of exposure, the inevitable unraveling of the carefully constructed web of lies that had sustained me for so long. The advances in forensic science and the inexorable progress of memory were adversaries I could no longer ignore. Each day, the specter of discovery loomed larger, a reminder that the past, however deeply buried, was never truly silent. I emerged from the chapel with a fragile resolve, a determination to reclaim a semblance of control over my destiny. I returned to the anonymity of the city, each step a defiant act of will against the oppressive forces of fate. Yet, even as I attempted to rebuild my identity from the ashes of my former life, I was keenly aware that the abyss within me was ever present, a chasm that threatened to swallow every vestige of light. In the solitude of a rainy night, as I sat at a rickety table in a dimly lit cantina, I began to piece together the fragments of my shattered soul. The low murmur of conversations, the clink of glasses, and the soft strains of a melancholy guitar filled the air, weaving a tapestry of sound that seemed to capture the essence of my internal struggle. I found myself scribbling notes on a crumpled napkin, half memories, half reflections, a desperate attempt to record the raw, unfiltered truth of my existence. The words flowed out of me in a disjointed stream, sometimes coherent, sometimes fragmented, much like the mosaic of my life. I recalled the moments of unexpected tenderness, the fleeting smiles shared with strangers on crowded streets, the quiet moments of understanding with those who had witnessed the world's cruelty. These memories, though rare and ephemeral, were like sparks in the vast darkness, brief glimmers of hope that challenged the overwhelming despair. I clung to them as if they were lifelines, even as the weight of my past pressed down with the force of 1,000 regrets. Yet, amid the torrent of memories and emotions, a profound realization began to crystallize. The darkness that had long defined me was not a simple absence of light, but a complex interplay of experiences of love and loss, of betrayal and fleeting moments of grace. In that intricate dance, I recognized that every act of violence, every moment of cruelty, had been a desperate bid for freedom, a rebellion against a world that had never truly understood me. The path I had chosen was not one of unbridled malice, but a convoluted journey through a landscape of moral ambiguity, where every decision was both a survival tactic and a surrender to fate. This revelation did not offer the comforting embrace of redemption, but it did provide a new lens through which to view the chaos of my existence. I began to see my life as a series of inevitable choices, each one leading inexorably toward the abyss. And yet, within that abyss, there remained the faintest glimmer of possibility, a chance, however slim, to reforge the shattered fragments of my soul into something resembling wholeness. In the weeks that followed, I resolved to embark on a pilgrimage of sorts, a journey not across distant lands, but into the deepest recesses of my own being. I sought out those who had once known me, those whose lives had intersected with mine in fleeting, yet indelible ways. I visited old haunts, retraced the steps of my most haunting memories, and in the process, I began to confront the stark reality of my own humanity. Each encounter was a painful mirror, reflecting back the raw truth of my existence. I listened to the whispered judgments of old acquaintances and observed the wary glances of strangers who sensed, without understanding, that something was profoundly amiss. There were moments when the confrontation was almost too much to bear, when the accumulated weight of decades of deception and violence pressed down on me like an avalanche. I recall one bitterly cold evening when I met with an old friend in a deserted park, the skeletal trees casting long, mournful shadows in the fading light. His eyes, once filled with warmth and familiarity, now held a mixture of pity and revulsion. In that silent exchange, I understood that the person I had become was an enigma, a paradox of calculated brutality and desperate vulnerability. His unspoken words pierced through the carefully constructed walls I had built around my heart, leaving me raw and exposed. As autumn gave way to winter, the landscape of my soul mirrored the stark barrenness of the season. The once vibrant hues of memory had faded into a palette of grays and muted blues, and I found myself wandering through streets that seemed to echo with the footsteps of ghosts. The relentless passage of time had weathered both the city and my spirit, leaving behind scars that could never fully heal. In the silent solitude of those long, frigid nights, I often questioned whether the journey inward was leading me towards some semblance of understanding, or if it was simply a descent into madness. Yet, even as the chill of isolation threatened to freeze my very essence, I discovered moments of startling beauty in the bleakness. In the quiet murmur of a frozen stream, in the soft luminescence of frost on bare branches, there lay a reminder that even in the heart of winter, life found a way to persist. These fragile instances of resilience stirred something deep within me, a quiet hope that, despite the darkness, there might be a path forward. In that fragile state of introspection, I resolved to document my journey not as a confession of sins, but as an exploration of the paradox that was my existence. I began writing again, this time with a clarity and purpose that transcended the simple need to escape my past. The words, raw and unfiltered, spilled onto pages that bore the weight of my soul. With each sentence, I attempted to capture the essence of the battle waged within me, the relentless struggle between the desire for absolution and the instinct to survive at any cost. I recalled the countless nights spent on deserted rooftops, gazing out over a city that had become both my sanctuary and my prison. I remembered the adrenaline-fueled rush of a narrow escape, the fleeting moments when I believed that the darkness could be outrun. And yet, with every escape, the shadow of my actions followed like a relentless specter, a reminder that the past is never truly laid to rest. In the pages of my journal, I chronicled not only the horrors of my actions but also the unexpected tenderness that occasionally broke through the veneer of cruelty. I wrote of a street musician whose melancholy tunes seemed to capture the soul of the city, a reminder that beauty could be found even in the most desolate corners of existence. I noted the quiet kindness of a stranger who offered a warm meal on a bitterly cold night, a gesture that stirred long-dormant memories of compassion. These entries, though painful to revisit, began to weave a tapestry of complexity, a testament to the idea that even a life marred by darkness could harbor sparks of unexpected light. As winter's grip slowly loosened and the first tentative blooms of spring began to emerge, I sensed a transformation stirring within me, a subtle shift in the interplay between my inner demons and the desire to embrace the possibility of change. The journey inward had been arduous, marked by moments of intense anguish and reluctant revelations. Yet, in the silent spaces between heartbeats, I could feel the stirring of a resolve that was both fragile and unyielding. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The ghosts of my past were as much a part of me as the blood that coursed through my veins, and the relentless march of justice was an ever-present reminder that escape was only temporary. But now, armed with the painful wisdom of introspection and the raw clarity of self-examination, I was determined to forge a new path, one where the abyss that had once threatened to consume me might instead become a crucible for transformation. The journey was far from over, and the descent into the abyss had revealed truths both horrifying and hopeful. I had come to understand that my existence was a tapestry of contradictions, a life defined by both cruelty and the capacity for redemption. And so, with trembling hands and a heart heavy with the weight of countless regrets, I stepped forward into an uncertain future, determined to confront the darkness within and, perhaps, to discover a measure of light amid the ruins. The unraveling of destiny. I reached the end of a road I never chose, yet one that fate had laid out before me in every whispered decision and every shrouded midnight. The years of flight, the ceaseless dance between life and impending doom, had left me with scars deeper than any blade, wounds etched not on skin but in the soul. Now, in the quiet solitude of a long-forgotten safe house on the edge of a decaying city, I found myself staring at the mirror one final time, at the face that had worn so many masks, at the eyes that had witnessed more horror than most could bear, and at a destiny that seemed poised to break the tenuous illusion of control I had clung to for decades. The room was sparse, illuminated only by the flickering light of a solitary bulb swinging from an ancient wire. Shadows danced on the cracked walls as if celebrating the inevitable unraveling of my carefully constructed world. I sat on a worn armchair, my fingers tracing the intricate patterns of scars, a silent catalog of my transgressions and the price of survival. In that moment, every stolen identity, every calculated escape, and every blood-soaked memory converged into a single, overwhelming truth: I was no longer running from my past, it had finally caught up with me. A gentle knock at the door startled me from my reverie. I hesitated before rising, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and a strange, fatal resignation. Opening the door revealed a figure shrouded in twilight, a man whose eyes, cold and unyielding, seemed to see right through the layers of deceit that had defined my life. His presence was not accompanied by fury or judgment, but by an almost clinical detachment that sent a chill coursing through me. "I've been looking for you," he said in a voice that was neither hostile nor kind, merely a statement of fact. In that moment, I recognized him as the embodiment of every relentless pursuit, every piece of evidence that had trailed me like a specter. There was no dramatic arrest, no fanfare of sirens or flashing lights, just the quiet inevitability of a fate long denied. I knew that the end of the road had arrived, and with it, the final reckoning for all the sins I had committed. As he led me through the empty corridors of a crumbling building that served as his temporary custody, my mind raced through memories that had once been locked away behind layers of denial. I recalled the first life I had abandoned, the cold precision of my actions, and the momentary thrill of power that had driven me to defy the natural order of life and death. I recalled the broken promises whispered to desperate lovers in darkened rooms, and the echo of final breaths in places where hope had long been extinguished. Each memory was a ghost, a relentless reminder that every life I had touched bore the indelible mark of my presence. Inside a dim interrogation room, stripped of all pretense, I was forced to confront the sum of my deeds. There were no triumphs here, only the raw, unfiltered exposure of a life lived in a perpetual state of fugitive agony. The officer across from me, with eyes that had seen too much yet remained distant, asked questions that dug into the marrow of my existence. With each query, I found myself not defending my actions, but simply confessing to the inevitability of my own unraveling. There was a strange beauty in the act of surrender, a final, unadorned acceptance that the burdens of the past could no longer be borne alone. The trial that followed was less a spectacle of justice and more a solemn ritual of closure. The courtroom became a stage where every fact, every piece of evidence, was laid bare for the world to witness. I listened to the recounting of my deeds, a litany of betrayal, murder, and calculated escapes, as if I were hearing them for the first time. Each name mentioned, each life that had been extinguished, resonated within me like the tolling of a distant bell heralding an end. I saw the faces of those I had wronged in the eyes of the jurors, in the murmurs of the gallery, and in the silent accusatory gaze of history itself. As the verdict was read, a final pronouncement that sealed my fate, I felt a curious sense of relief mingled with an ineffable sorrow. The chains of the past, once invisible yet inescapable, now bound me in a tangible way. The life I had led, a life defined by endless reinvention and perpetual evasion, had come to an end, not with the bang of a grand finale, but with the quiet acceptance of consequences long overdue. In the solitary confinement of my cell, as I awaited the final chapter of my journey, I found myself alone with the memories of a life that had been as much a curse as it was a source of twisted liberation. The cold, unyielding walls around me were a mirror of the desolation I felt inside, a final, stark reminder that no amount of ingenuity or deception could erase the immutable truths of destiny. I spent long hours in reflective silence, the only company the distant echoes of my past and the steady tick of a clock that counted down to my inevitable end. And yet, even in that darkness, I discovered a glimmer of something unexpected, an understanding that the person I had become was not solely defined by my transgressions, but also by the choices that had led me to this moment of irrevocable clarity. I recalled the quiet moments of tenderness in a life otherwise marred by cruelty, the soft glow of dawn breaking through the oppressive night, the fleeting smile of a stranger who, for a moment, had seen the humanity buried deep within me. These fragments of light, though rare and transient, reminded me that even the most fractured soul might harbor the seeds of redemption. In the final days before the curtain fell, I began to write a final act of confession and catharsis, not as a plea for forgiveness, but as a testament to the complex tapestry of a life lived at the margins of morality. I filled pages with raw, unvarnished truths, with vivid descriptions of a world where every shadow held a secret, and every ray of light cast a trace of its own sorrow. The act of writing became my final rebellion against the oblivion that threatened to claim me, a defiant assertion that my existence, in all its flawed splendor, would not vanish without leaving a mark. When the day of reckoning finally arrived, I walked to the execution chamber with a calm that belied the tumultuous journey of my soul. I had long ceased to fear the end, I had embraced it as an integral part of my fate. There was no dramatic outcry, no final words of defiance, only a quiet resolve to face the culmination of a lifetime defined by choices that could neither be undone nor fully explained. As the mechanism was set in motion, I closed my eyes, not in surrender, but in a final, profound moment of introspection, a silent farewell to the woman I once was, and to the myriad lives that had been inextricably woven into the fabric of my own. In that final instant, as the world around me faded into darkness, I felt neither regret nor triumph. There was only the clarity of truth, the recognition that every step, every misdeed, had led me here, to this singular moment where destiny and self converged. And as I slipped away, I carried with me the echoes of all those lost voices, the lingering taste of both sin and salvation, and the haunting certainty that the unraveling of my destiny was not an end, but a final unveiling of the life I had so desperately tried to hide. As the final credits of this haunting journey begin to roll, I invite you to reflect upon the labyrinth of secrets, betrayals, and dark desires that have defined my existence, a life lived on the razor's edge of morality and madness. In the fading glow of this narrative, where every whispered confession and every shadowed memory has led us to this inevitable moment of reckoning, I stand before you not as a glorified villain but as a mosaic of contradictions, a woman forged in the crucible of sin and redemption. Throughout these years, I have danced with darkness and flirted with the edge of oblivion, always teetering between the promise of escape and the suffocating weight of the past. I was once a creature of habit, a quiet, unassuming figure in a small town where every smile concealed a secret, every nod hid a regret. But fate, in its cruel irony, shattered the illusion of normalcy with a single, irrevocable act. That act, the catalyst for everything that followed, split my soul into fragments, one part desperate for freedom, the other chained to memories of blood and betrayal. Tonight, as you listen to the echo of my story, you witness not only the surface of a life steeped in criminality but also the depths of a troubled soul that longed for absolution. In the hushed silence of my final hours, I have come to understand that every decision, every cold, calculated moment was both an act of survival and a descent into self-destruction. I embraced the art of deception, weaving an intricate tapestry of new identities and escape routes, yet each layer of disguise also served as a testament to the irreversible choices I made. No matter how skillfully I reinvented myself, the truth was a persistent specter that hovered, waiting to reclaim its due. I remember the countless nights when the city lights blurred into a hazy mosaic of neon and shadows, a relentless reminder that the world never forgets. In those hours of solitude, the advances in forensic science, the meticulous records of our digital age, were like silent judges, ever ready to expose the lies that had become my lifeline. With every clandestine meeting in rain-soaked alleyways and every hurried escape into the anonymity of a new city, the weight of my past pressed down upon me. Each face I encountered in the mirror was a ghost from a bygone era, a relic of the woman I once was, now lost to the relentless passage of time. And yet, in the midst of despair, there were fleeting moments of startling beauty, a stray smile on a desolate street, the gentle caress of a cool breeze on a sultry night, or the unexpected kindness of a stranger who saw beyond my carefully constructed facade. These brief flashes of light, though transient, reminded me that even in the heart of darkness there exists a spark of humanity. They whispered to me of redemption, of the possibility that amidst the chaos, there might be a sliver of hope to salvage something of my soul. As I stand here at the threshold of finality, I am compelled to confront the truth, that the life I led was not solely defined by acts of violence or the cold precision of my escapes, but also by the endless internal struggle between remorse and defiance. Every heartbeat became a silent protest against the fate that had been thrust upon me, a fate intertwined with both the allure of the criminal underworld and the crushing burden of regret. I came to see that my journey was not merely about evading justice or hiding in the shadows, but about the relentless pursuit of an identity that could reconcile the fractured pieces of my being. I have walked the dim corridors of forgotten churches, lingered in derelict boarding houses where the peeling wallpaper and flickering bulbs bore witness to 1,000 unsaid prayers, and sat in the quiet confinement of prison cells where time itself seemed to slow to a mournful crawl. In these moments, I learned that the darkness within me was not a simple void but a complex interplay of guilt, anger, sorrow, and an unyielding desire for redemption. The faces of those I wronged, each stolen life, each shattered dream remained etched in my memory like indelible scars, reminders that no amount of flight or reinvention could erase the consequences of my choices. In this final reckoning, I stand exposed before the unblinking eyes of society, a society that demands justice, that seeks to balance the scales between punishment and mercy. The courtroom, with its austere silence and somber gravity, became the stage for my ultimate confession. There were no heroic proclamations, no dramatic reversals of fate, only the quiet, relentless unveiling of a life lived in perpetual twilight. As the verdict was delivered, a strange calm descended upon me, a calm born not of resignation, but of the understanding that every path I trod, every step I took, led inexorably to this moment of truth. Now, as I prepare to face the final consequences of a lifetime defined by deceit and defiance, I find solace in the certainty that my story is a testament to the enduring complexities of the human spirit. Inside the Criminal World is not simply a chronicle of crimes committed and identities abandoned. It is a profound exploration of the inherent duality of our nature, the constant battle between the desire for absolution and the instinct for survival. It is a narrative that challenges us to look beyond the surface, to see that within the heart of even the most tormented soul, there lies a capacity for both darkness and light. As the screen fades to black and the final notes of this journey echo into silence, I leave you with a parting thought, that every life, no matter how marred by sin or how entwined with the criminal underbelly, is ultimately a mosaic of experiences, a tapestry woven from moments of beauty, cruelty, hope, and despair. The choices we make, the paths we choose, become the threads that bind us to our destiny. And while some may find themselves irrevocably lost in the maze of their own making, others may, against all odds, glimpse a sliver of redemption in the midst of chaos. This is my legacy, a legacy not of triumph over evil, but of a ceaseless struggle against the inevitable pull of fate. It is a legacy that speaks to the cost of freedom, the price of survival, and the haunting realization that the past is never truly gone. It lingers like a ghost in the corridors of memory, a constant reminder that no matter how far we run, the truth remains inescapable. In the twilight of my journey, I have come to accept that every secret, every whispered confession, was a necessary step toward understanding the profound depths of my own humanity. So, as we close this chapter of Inside the Criminal World, I urge you to carry this truth with you, that within the shadows of our darkest deeds lies the possibility of transformation, a possibility as fragile and elusive as a dying ember. May this story serve as both a cautionary tale and a call to introspection, a reminder that even in the bleakest corners of our existence, the light of redemption may one day pierce the darkness. Thank you for joining me on this journey, a journey through the hidden realms of crime, conscience, and the human heart. In the end, it is not the title we bear, nor the sins we commit, but the capacity to confront our own truth that defines us. I leave you now with the lingering echoes of my confession, a final testament to the intricate dance between light and shadow that will forever shape the legacy of Inside the Criminal World.